Hi, I'm Chris Hughes, and I've owned a home-based business now for almost 10 years. It's been the best business decision that I've ever made. And over the last 10 years, I've learned a lot about the difference between the rich and the poor. And interestingly enough, over the last several years, I've gone from being poor to being rich. And the reason why that happened is because I learned the rules of the wealthy. Isn't that funny? You learn the rules of the game of the wealthy and you can become wealthy. Most people play by the rules of poverty, they wind up in poverty. People who play by the rules of middle class become middle class. But people who play by the rules of the rich can become rich. And over the next few minutes, I want to talk about the difference between the rich and the poor. And it's simply this. The major difference between the rich and the poor of this country is how much money they spend on their number one expense. How much money they spend on their number one expense. So I could tell you if you were rich or if you were poor based upon how much you spend on your number one expense. Or in other words, what percentage of your total income you were spending on your number one expense. Now, what is your number one expense? Most people say it's my house, but it's not your house. Your number one expense is not your house. Your number one expense is taxes. Between what we pay in state and federal taxes and tax at the gas pump and tax at the grocery counter and taxes everywhere else we have to pay them, a lot of people are paying 50% of their total income in taxes. So I can tell if you're a rich person or a poor person or middle class based upon the percentage of your total income that is spent or paid in taxes. That's the difference between the rich and the poor. Now follow me on this. I think generally the poor and middle class have jobs. Okay, the middle class obviously have better jobs than the poor, but they still have jobs. And the rich own businesses or they own assets. They own real estate. They've got stock portfolios. But the poor middle class, they work, and usually the rich have a business. Now let me tell you the rules that the poor and middle class play by. What they do is they work at a job, they pay taxes, and they spend what's left over. Isn't that what most of us do, or at least have done in our lives? Is we go and we get this job, and we work, and then before we even get the paycheck, Uncle Sam takes his part, right? He goes in and grabs his part of the money, and you got to pay FICA, PUCA, SICA, and all that other stuff. But Uncle Sam grabs his part of your paycheck before you ever even see your paycheck. And then you're left to spend what's left over. Isn't that how it works? So you work, you pay taxes, you spend what's left over. Now, the rich, on the other hand, many of them have businesses. So they either work or their money works for them. And then the rich will, instead of paying taxes, they spend and invest all that they can. So they work or their money works for them. They spend and invest all that they can, and then they pay taxes on what's left. Do you see the difference? The poor work, they pay taxes, they spend what's left. The only money that's available for them is what is left over after taxes, after Uncle Sam gets whatever it is that he feels like he needs to get out of your paycheck. So the poor work, they pay taxes, they spend what's left. The rich, the wealthy of this country, they work, they spend and invest all that they can, and they only have to pay taxes on what's left. That's why having a business or a home-based business is such a great idea, because then you can play by the rules of the wealthy. Then you work, you spend and invest all that you can, and you only have to pay taxes on what's left. Isn't that great? Let me give you an example of this. Apples to apples. Let's say that Bob is middle class. Okay, Bob is middle or upper middle class, and he works at a job, and he earns $100,000 in a year. Well, he earned $100,000, but he did not bring home $100,000. He probably only brought home about $70,000. So he paid $30,000 that year to Uncle Sam. $30,000. Before he ever saw his paycheck, he gave Uncle Sam $30,000. Now let's look at Mary on the other hand. Mary is rich. Mary has a home-based business on the side. Mary also earned $100,000. But Mary brought home $100,000. She earned $100,000. She brought home $100,000. And then Mary spent and invested all that she could. And she only has to pay taxes on what's left. Well, let's say that she spends $85,000, and part of that money would be her mortgage, right? But that's a tax write-off because she has a home-based business, or at least a portion of it is, on her utilities. Well, that's a tax write-off because she runs a home-based business. On her car, well, it's not her car, it's her company car. On her, she spent money on her cell phone and her home phone. Well, those aren't her phones, those are her company phones. Do you catch my drift? So let's say she spent $85,000 in legitimate business-related expenses. That leaves her $15,000 in actual quote-unquote bring home pay. Well, she only has to pay taxes on the $15,000. That puts her in a 15% tax bracket, which puts her at about $2,200 that she has to pay in taxes on $100,000 in income. That's the difference between the rich and the poor. If you don't have a home-based business or a business, you got to get one, especially a home-based business, because you can write off a portion of your mortgage or your rent. It's great. Why they're not teaching this in high school is beyond me. Every 18-year-old should have a home-based business starting when they're 18, and they should have it forever because of all the amazing write-offs that you get. And it allows you to play the game of the wealthy. So hang out with me for a little while longer. My next video is entitled, How to Increase Your Bring Home Pay Now. It's a great video, and I hope you'll watch it. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.